unanswered questions for the vaccine injury program, a review of compensated cases of vaccine-induced brain injury. Mr. Conte serves as the board of the Elizabeth Byrd Center for Autism Law and Advocacy. In his professional life, Mr. Conte is an associate commissioner of the Westchester County Department of Probation, where he's administered investigation and supervision programs that focus on sex offenders and domestic violence perpetrators. He is proud to have been part of a team that established the nation's first sex offense court. Mr. Conte graduated from Iona College in 1982. He is an instructor in the Japanese martial arts and jiu-jitsu.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We have a problem. A couple of years ago, special masters ruled that vaccines are not linked to autism. The problem with that ruling is that it actually ran counter to what had been going on in the program in the years previous to the establishment of the omnibus autism proceedings. What do I mean? The rulings came out and described the parents as being very wrong. The rulings were in fact mocking the parents for having listened to doctors who feel that a vaccine injury could result in autism. However, before the program ran the actual hearings for the omnibus autism proceedings, one case called Hannah Poland, was pulled out and settled on the side. The government found that vaccines administered to Hannah Poland did not cause her autism, but that they resulted in her autism. And this problem of parlance and the use of descriptive language within the program is something that I find to be, frankly, very confusing. And it causes me to ask a lot of questions, which is why ultimately I became involved in an investigation that led to a paper called Unanswered Questions from the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, a review of compensated cases of vaccine-induced brain injury. There are copies available in the back. We call on Congress to hold hearings on this program. There are indeed unanswered questions. Further, we think that an independent medical assessment should be made of those individuals who the government has compensated for vaccine injury. It is time to finally ask the question, what does a vaccine injury really look like? Because if you look at the history of this program for a number of years, in fact, it looked like autism. If you look at the table injury description of encephalopathy, that is brain damage, you will find that that description is not terribly different than the description of autism. So we have an issue here. All of a sudden, we saw a set of hearings set up to deal with a behavioral disorder. Now, our two lawyers here, and I am not a lawyer, incidentally. I am an administrator of the probation department, but I very much believe in specialty justice programs. Part of my career has been involved in specialty courts, domestic violence courts, drug courts. Very successful programs that really do bring specific justice needs to bear with specific populations. And I'm very proud of my involvement in advocating for the establishment of a sex offense court, the nation's first sex offense court in Westchester County. So I've been around courts for 28 years. I have a different view of them than attorneys do. And I have to tell you that I've never seen anything quite like this. I found myself looking up cases and found descriptions of children in case decisions in which behaviors described were autism. There was no doubt about it. There was self-abusive behavior described, repetitive behavior described, children described as having gone through regressions just the way parents of children with autism describe. Exactly the same. And these definitions, and these cases were described in the years before we knew that there was a real increase in autism. So that's a crucial point. I will tell you that I think that the use of language within this program is confusing and needs to be vetted. We conducted an investigation of compensated cases. We asked the federal government to give us records of the people who've been through the program who awarded compensation. We recognized that their identities needed to be protected, but we asked for certain information from the federal government via FOIL request. Federal government, in the age of transparency, told us it would take 5 years and we would have to pay $750,000 to get that information. This is transparency. Ultimately, we ran searches through existing databases through Westlaw. There we found 21 cases where autism was in fact described as a vaccine injury and the cases were compensated. I'll give you some excerpts from those shortly. We also, through searching through the PACER database, identified hundreds of cases that were compensated and settled. We then had to reach out to those families and ask them if they wanted to participate in a structured interview. I'll talk about those results in a second. First, the case decisions. What do previous case decisions before the omnibus proceedings tell us about what really was the status of autism in the program? One particular case, Bailey Banks. The court found that Bailey would not have suffered this developmental delay but for the administration of the MMR vaccine, and that this chain of causation was not too remote, but was rather a proximate sequence of cause and effect, leading inexorably from vaccination to pervasive developmental delay, that is to say, an autism spectrum disorder. Bailey Banks' autism was directly related to his vaccine injury. How does this square with the decisions in the omnibus proceedings? Case called Keenan-Freeman. In this particular case, autism is found to be a result of the brain damage that was a result of the vaccine injury. However, the special master notes that this case does not have relevance to other cases pending before him in the omnibus autism proceedings. Why not? What is it that is going on here really? In terms of the concessions, ultimately, we identified 62 families who were willing to talk to us. And what they told us, frankly within the first 3 minutes typically, was that their children had been compensated for seizure disorders or for encephalopathy, again, brain damage, but that their children also had autism. And that everybody in the program knew that. And so we're forced with this question, why did we really have these proceedings? What really was at stake here? And why were they done? We were left with unanswered questions. How frequently has autism been associated with vaccine injury or brain damage, leading to brain damage over the life of the program? As there is no meaningful distinction between cases of encephalopathy and seizure disorder that the VICP compensated over the last 20 years, are the recent VICP decisions to reject all cases that use the term autism fair. Are we not looking at discrimination here because certain people have a label of autism? Now, if there is any reason for Congress to ask tough questions, have we constructed a federal program that protects manufacturers, that protects the government, that protects industry, that protects doctors, and discriminates against people who have a label? If there's any reason for Congress to hold hearings and ask tough questions, that is the reason right there.